Greetings all. It is February 16th, 2023. I have a bit of a cold right now, which is affecting my voice, so apologies for that. The following is for entertainment purposes only. This presentation includes important dates and graphics. Therefore, I advise watching it on my Aquarian Diary YouTube channel, if possible. Today I will talk about the current transit of Neptune through Pisces and how it may manifest very differently when it enters Aries in early 2025. Neptune's orbit is about 165 years, so it spends many years in each of the 12 signs. Thanks to more advanced telescopes, Neptune was first observed in 1846, just before it entered Pisces the last time. Traditionally, Jupiter was considered the ruler of Pisces. Many believe that when a planet is quote-unquote discovered, it signifies that humanity is ready to begin to manifest the consciousness represented by that planet. Think about the many social and spiritual advancements that have occurred since Neptune was discovered. We are completing our first collective conscious Neptune cycle and about to begin a new one. I find the timing and implications of that fascinating. The last time Neptune was in Pisces was between 1847 and 1862. The last time it was in Aries was 1861 through 1875. You may have noted that the American Civil War occurred between 1861 and 1865 when Neptune was in Aries. The American Civil War started on April 12th, 1861. Remarkably, Neptune entered Aries the very following day, on April 13th of 1861. We should in no way jump to conclusions about one astrological event alone, as there are a myriad of ever-changing variables to consider. But this correlation is nonetheless dramatic. More on that later. More recently, Neptune first entered Pisces in April of 2011, and will complete that transit in January of 2026. Neptune will then transit Aries, roughly from March of 2025, all the way through March of 2039. There are transitional phases at the beginning and ending of these transits due to retrogrades, so the cycles often overlap somewhat. We should probably be grateful for this, otherwise it could be quite jarring for these shifts to occur instantaneously. I'm not sure we could cope with that. Neptune is the modern ruling planet of Pisces in the 12th house in astrology. Mars rules Aries in the first house. Pisces is mutable water, and Aries is cardinal fire. These are very different energies. Neptune is very at home in Pisces where it is now, but it will be much less so in fiery Aries. The first degree of Aries is a very important point, as it marks significant new beginnings. Therefore, a new 165-year cycle for Neptune will commence during 2025 and 2026, and this is definitely worth paying attention to. Now let's consider what these astrological symbols represent. I have discussed some of these previously, so I will just provide a synopsis here. Check my astrology playlist on YouTube to find other episodes where I discuss some of these topics in greater detail. Note that I'm speaking in general terms here. Each person or entity has its own very unique chart which will affect how these energies and archetypes are expressed. Planets, signs, and houses are not exactly the same thing, even though they can be closely related. Also, I have made many calculations here, and I would not be surprised to later find that my math was off a bit somewhere. If so, I will note it on my errata page. Neptune's sign, Pisces, and the 12th house are associated with the late winter months in the northern hemisphere, time of rest, going inwards, rejuvenation, and contemplation. Aries is linked to the spring equinox, when night and day are equal lengths. This marks the beginning of a new annual cycle, a period of vigorous growth, rebirth, increasing light and dramatically elevated activity. All planets and signs have both positive and negative expressions. Very briefly, positive expressions of Neptune and Pisces are higher or cosmic consciousness and tapping into the spiritual dimensions. Being watery, yin, and non-material, it is often associated with esoteric matters such as psychic and intuitive phenomenon, divination and channeling, as well as being empathic, charitable, compassionate, and selfless. It is also connected to the church or religion, as it is where we try and connect to the divine or non-material aspects of human experience. Religion and philosophy are also strongly connected to the ninth house, or Sagittarius, as is much of the dogma that is associated with them. Many creative people, such as artists, composers, writers, entertainers, and performers, can channel Piscean or Neptunian energies into creative works. Dreams and dream time can be inspired. Lower expressions can be being very ungrounded, detached from reality, being prone to deception, self-deception, illusion, delusion, or being overly idealistic and not pragmatic. There can also be a tendency for escapism from harsh reality, which may involve drugs and addictions or even mental illness. In traditional astrology, the 12th house was associated with imprisonment, seclusion, confinement, self-undoing, secrets, hidden enemies, and foreign lands. In the past, people were very fearful of the unknown, and that would include foreign lands. Modern astrology is much less fatalistic. We now often have much more control over our destiny and self-expression than when the lives of the vast majority of the population were severely fated and fixed at birth. In contrast, the positive expression of Mars, the ruler of Aries, can be taking bold action and initiative, being daring, courageous, being strong, independent, athletic, not shying from competition, and being decisive. This is the kind of energy that gets people up and doing things. Negative expressions of Mars can be being pushy, impulsive, combative, rash, self-centered, and inconsiderate, if not rude at times. You do not want to get in the way of the ram's horns. Mars, the god of war and warfare, is a very masculine, yang, and fiery energy. Mars often expresses itself in short, intense bursts and is not typically known for stamina. Think sprinter rather than long-distance marathoner. The number of projects started often exceeds the number completed. Now let's consider what happens when we put the energies of transiting Neptune into these two signs. Again, for the sake of brevity, this is merely a synopsis. Hefty volumes have been dedicated to these topics. Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, is very much at home in its own sign. It essentially emphasizes or amplifies the characteristics I have already described, both positive and negative. In recent years, we have seen a very significant rise of interest in esoteric and metaphysical subjects, such as astrology, tarot, and spirituality. Many people are expressing psychic and intuitive abilities in a wide variety of ways. There is also a great deal of discussion about a spiritual ascension occurring on Earth now, which is lifting us collectively to higher dimensions of consciousness. There has also been vocal support for the rights of marginalized groups, such as those who do not express traditional or stereotypical gender archetypes, as well as others who face systemic discrimination, and this has been widely expressed in popular culture. There have been many calls for more fair, just, and idealistic economic, political, and social justice systems. There has also been a growing movement, particularly amongst the young, for environmental protection and justice, which often conflicts with entrenched and unsustainable, if not archaic, financial and corporate agendas. On the negative side, we have seen a deluge of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, lies, mass deception, and absurd conspiracy theories. There have been reactionary forces who overtly reject evidence, facts, experts, expertise, science, history, and electoral outcomes, and have engaged in things like widespread book banning, and they seem to revel in belligerent ignorance. Social media platforms and some so-called news outlets and networks, particularly on the right of the political spectrum, have contributed to the spread of blatant misinformation on an unprecedented scale. Brexit, the election of Donald Trump, and the completely unjustifiable and pointless invasion of Ukraine are notable examples of consequences. There have been one crisis after another of deadly substance abuse and addiction to which many have succumbed. We have had a global pandemic, think confinement, lockdowns, and hidden enemies, and we have become aware of a relentless onslaught of PSYOP disinformation campaigns clandestinely sponsored by adversarial countries. Think foreign lands, secrets, and again, hidden enemies, surreptitiously messing with our minds and undermining liberal democracies. There have also been epic and almost biblical floods around the world, along with unprecedented and widespread severe weather events, too numerous to recount. Mass migration has been a theme, with millions of people being displaced from their traditional homelands and seeking shelter in foreign lands. I could go on, but consider how these themes relate to Neptune, the 12th house, and Pisces. Of course, there has also been the shocking and deeply disturbing rise of far-right nationalism, authoritarianism, fascism, racism, xenophobia, and misogyny, as well as extreme wealth disparity and the rise of plutocrats, but I think that is more related to Pluto's transit of Capricorn. See my other episodes on that. There has also been the ongoing USA-Pluto return, which I have discussed as well. So what might we expect when ethereal Neptune transits Aries commencing in 2025 through 2039? Here's where things get even more complicated. As I have previously stated, the beginning of Aries is a very potent and important point in the zodiac, as it marks the beginning. 0 degrees of Aries is arguably the most important of all 360 degrees. However, Neptune and Mars represent energies that are about as different as we can get in astrology. Pisces is the end, and Aries is the beginning. Neptune is introspective or yin, Mars is extroverted or yang. Neptune is water, Mars is fire. If this sounds polarizing, if not confusing, it is because it is. During the period of 2025 through 2039, Neptune transiting Aries will be in a challenging aspect to all of the other cardinal signs. It will be in square to Capricorn and Cancer while opposing Libra. Briefly, Capricorn, ruled by Saturn, represents leaders, authorities, and authoritative institutions. Cancer, ruled by the Moon, represents feminine, nurturing, and the literal home environment. In mundane astrology, it represents the state of nations with respect to the populace. In other words, are people happy or not? Libra, ruled by Venus, represents diplomacy, balance, relationships, open enemies, mostly long-term relationships such as marriage, but also business partnerships. I can tell you very sincerely that the period of when Neptune squared my own sun was one of the most difficult transits I have ever experienced. I was shocked, even though I was expecting it. Neptune, being non-material, has a way of dissolving things. I slept my way through that period and struggled to survive as things just seemed to slip through my fingers. It was like I was in a fog and I could not seem to materialize anything during that roughly 2-year period. On the contrary, it was all about loss and letting go. That period profoundly altered my life. In fact, at times I was absolutely convinced that I was the victim of powerful psychic and energetic attacks by dark forces, and even had that confirmed by multiple highly qualified individuals. I experienced many vivid, dark, and frightening nightmares. I was psychically wide open and almost defenseless. I eventually began practicing Kundalini yoga, I studied with a mystery school, and I took a deep dive into crystals. Much of this effort was aimed at defending myself and reinforcing myself energetically, which I was intensely determined to do, but it also elevated me. All of what I just described is very archetypically 12th house, is it not? But back to the main topic. What follows is very important. I hope you are paying attention. While studying this transit of Neptune, I noticed the following aspect that, to me, seems truly remarkable and must be exceedingly rare. On February 20th of 2026, Saturn, the Lord of Karma, will exactly conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees, 45 minutes, and 10 seconds of Aries. Yes, these two major planets will meet at the very first degree of Aries. Incredible. These two planets normally conjoin around every 36 years or so, but the odds of this happening at the very first degree of Aries must be minuscule. Due to retrogrades, they will perform an extraordinary dance around the very beginning of Aries from May of 2025 through March of 2026. I'm getting strong chills here. That will truly be something to behold, no doubt. If we consider a wider 15-degree orb of highly activated contact for such alignments, based on my calculations, the active period for the beginning of this new and historically potent Saturn-Neptune cycle would span March of 2024 through April of 2027. Again, that is the 3-year period in which these two planets will be within 15 degrees apart. To reiterate, March of 2024 through April of 2027, with an exact conjunction on February 20th of 2026. Anyone with planets or points on the cardinal axis at late Pisces, early Aries, late Gemini, early Cancer, late Virgo, early Libra, late Sagittarius, early Capricorn, will want to be paying attention to this. Now let's recall the timing of the American Civil War I mentioned earlier, which erupted exactly as Neptune entered Aries in April of 1861. It was a war over slavery, one of the most egregious, vile, and dark practices known to humanity. It was a war for what is virtuous, just, and ethical, that all should be treated equally. Neptune combined with the force and conviction of Mars, the ruler of Aries. Had the outcome of that civil war differed, the world could be dramatically different than it is now. We have not attained perfection by any means. We are still very much collectively a work in progress, but that was a very significant turning point in human history. The many who saved the world from the utter horrors of fascism in World War II also come to mind. Many people sacrificed their lives for a truly just and noble cause, and we should be profoundly grateful for their courage of conviction. If spiritual warriors exist, that term would certainly apply to them. I will now list some of the expressions of Neptune in Aries, again, 2025 through 2039, that come to mind. Some of this is based on study, some is extrapolation, some is intuitive. Some of this is predictable based on current trends, some is not. Always trust your own intuition and judgment before making any significant decisions. I am factoring in the influence of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction I have previously described. Apply the following at your own discretion. So here goes. A crisis of masculinity and masculine expression. Clashes, perhaps actual violent conflicts or incidents, between progressive and reactionary conservative, fascistic, or authoritarian forces. Increasing polarization between rational and possibly excessively reductionist worldviews and theological, religious, or ideological worldviews. A clash of worldviews. The collapse or severe undermining of institutions that have existed for many generations. Think banking, finance, other governing bodies, and authorities. A crisis of housing and home. Housing may be impermanent and unreliable, likely due to climate and environmental problems. Geographic areas affected include those that were historically considered reliable and predictable. Cost of housing may continue to be a major problem. Formerly safe areas threatened by sea level rise or repeated flooding causing migration and housing supply shortages in other safer regions. Refugee camps. Issues pertaining to the family structure and nurturing. Long-held norms change. Much confusion in this area. Fewer women willing to mother. Failures of diplomacy and international relations. Old conventions no longer apply. Increased political polarization. Left moving left, right moving right, becoming further entrenched. Conflicts that turn out not to be based on anything tangible, real, or even rational when viewed in hindsight. Motivated by illusions, fabricated evidence, distortions, illegitimate narratives, clashing paradigms, ideologies, or confused communications that cannot be bridged easily. A crisis involving male fertility or infertility. Declining birth rates for reasons that may not be clearly understood, perhaps related to environmental contamination or contagions. Androgynous styles, fashions, and aesthetics. Think David Bowie and Boy George. Glam. Romanticized and idealized masculinity. A crisis of faith for the church and religions, being forced to address past misdeeds, scandals, and blatant hypocrisy. Tax-free status threatened due to excessive partisan political activism. Increasingly polarized climatic swings and weather events. Severe drought and wildfires, fire, followed by intermittent deluges of historic floods and rain, water. Weakened crops, crop failures due to extreme or unusual weather patterns. Significant challenges with pollination and seeding, perhaps due to reduced insect populations. Invasive species and/or contagions harming natural ecosystems and wildlife. Traditional male roles dissolving, as were typically expressed in many trades. Traditional employment being displaced by technology, artificial intelligence, automation, roboticization, etc. Another aspect of the crisis for masculinity. A lot of those traditional jobs may become obsolete. We will also be moving into a more intellectual framework, especially with Pluto transiting Aquarius. Implications for military and warfare. Troops displaced by technology such as robotics, AI, and automation. Many soldiers could become redundant or obsolete. A surprising collapse of hegemonies or monopolies in many areas, including nations and large corporations, that may have dominated for many generations previously. Unrest amongst the populace, who struggle to deal with dissolving traditional ways of living and socio-economic conditions, especially for those who are rigid, inflexible, or overly attached to dying, dogmatic, and materialistic paradigms. A widespread, aggressive contagion or disease which produces high fever and spreads quickly. Virtual reality being widely deployed and accessible, resulting in more people being detached from reality and increasingly isolated from human interaction. Traditional roles between males and females stressed and undermined. More fluidity results. Rivers and water supplies continue depleting, drying up and becoming unreliable. Mechanization, such as desalination, deployed to produce potable water in some regions. Mountain glaciers that previously supplied water to many regions disappear. Accelerated sea level rise and land-based glacial ice mass reduction, exceeding even some of our worst projections. The positive side of all this, from my perspective, is that humanity is indeed ascending. We are at the cusp of the end of the age of Pisces and the beginning of the age of Aquarius. This is a dramatic change. As I have expressed on my channel before, we are going through a significant paradigm shift, and the old collective paradigm is collapsing. This and other potent astrological events, such as the imminent transit of Pluto through Aquarius through 2044, seem to be clearly aligned with that narrative. Absolutely. In order to make this transition, we must let go of all of the abstract, arbitrary, and defunct structures and belief systems that have at once defined and sheltered, but at the same time severely limited, humanity and our potential. We are now like the proverbial snake shedding its skin. We can no longer fit within the rigid confines and constructs that have restricted us for over 2,000 years. I know this process can be challenging and uncomfortable. I know it can be difficult. I know it can even be scary at times. But on the other side is freedom and expanse. A lighter, higher vibrational, and more rewarding way of being. A way of being that more accurately reflects our true higher and innate inner nature. The easiest way to get through this transition is to not be in resistance to it. Resistance is exhausting to maintain, especially when the forces at play are so cosmic. Over time, extreme resistance may wear people down so much that they simply opt to leave. In other words, escape. Instead, rather, I encourage you to be a vehicle for change and evolution. This is a rare point in human history. You chose to incarnate here now, and it is a privilege many souls desired, but only a select few have been granted. Embrace and unfold your inner truth, limitless power, and light.